Hello and welcome to Everybody Pulls the Tarp. I'm your host, Andrew Moses. Joining me today, a very, very special guest, Richard Davis, the president and CEO of the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Thanks, Andrew. So happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
I am so excited to chat with you, Richard. I know, we caught up about a month or so ago. You're doing phenomenal things at Make-A-Wish as always.
Yep.
But what I really want to dig into is a lot of what got you to Make-A-Wish and the many decades of work before, and then we'll talk about what you're doing at Make-A-Wish. So, Richard, where I want to start, I want to go back. I think your first job, you were 18. You started as a teller at a Bank of America, and you worked your way all the way up to the top of the banking industry, to president and CEO, executive chairman at U.S. Bancorp, which you were at until you left and joined Make-A-Wish. Talk about being an 18-year-old and becoming a bank teller. What drew you to work at a bank?
Thanks, Andrew. So, and I think I know the audience pretty well, so I'll add to the story because it actually starts before that. I was 17 and graduated from high school. I was young, and I had been accepted to the Air Force Academy at the very end of that high school year. And it's a very couple of year process to be nominated and then to be accepted to the academies. But based on the age old years ago when I was in school, I was ready to go. And then my invitation was deferred by 1 year. And the class that I was a part of in the mid 70s, that was the year that the Congress added women to the academies, which is a fantastic idea. And so the class that I was to join was reduced by 10 or 15%, the cadets, because they wanted to bring women in. Sadly, there wasn't actually a class of women because it took 2 years to cultivate, but I was deferred by a year and we had no money. And any other alternatives I had to college, I'd already passed on because I was going to the Air Force Academy. So my story starts with, I immediately had to go to a public school, a university in California, and I had to work full time in order to pay for it. It's not a sad story at all. It actually informed big part of who I am. But I found the best way to work full time was to work at a bank because it's only a day job and no weekends. And I went to college for 8 years at night school where Monday through Thursday, each night was a 3-hour block of time, each night equaling 1 week of curriculum. So that's how it all started. And then I'll end here. Banking became something I didn't know I would love. I didn't even recognize it in myself until one of my bosses approached me maybe in my second year. I might have been 19. And she said, I think you'd be a great banker. You ought to make this a career. And I jokingly said, well, I'm not going to school for that. You clearly haven't been following my path. And she says, oh, I know exactly what you want to do. She goes, I think you have found your calling. I want to put you in a training course for leadership and let's see how it goes. And that is the moment in time. And that lady, my boss, I've never seen her in 35 years, but if I could go back and point out one person in my professional life that changed my entire life because she believed in me and saw something I didn't even know, it would be her. And I'll bet you have one, and I'll bet everybody does. And as they go through life, go back to that person. And if it isn't a parent, it's often a coach or a teacher, and let them know that they made that much difference.
Absolutely. There are always people, as you put it, Richard, that you might not even realize at the time. Often you don't, I find, realize at the time. Like you said, the impact that they're going to have. So, I mean, I just admire the creativity and ingenuity for a young man at the time to identify the being a bank teller as because of the hours, because of the having off on the weekends and the holidays, to blend with the night schooling. But it still must have been a really tough balance. And talk about that experience.
Yeah, first of all, it's important not to have a chip on my shoulder because when you are young, you can always feel poor me. And I did at first. I really, really suffered the loss of the Air Force Academy because even in my older life, people say, well, look, it all worked out great. And I'd say to them, it did, but I really wanted to go. It's not like it's just an alternative that says another choice. So for whatever reason, it wasn't meant to be. But night school became this, after the fact, Andrew, which you talk about, I think, often. I recognized that I never got a single full-time professor over 8 years. I look back and I realized not one daytime tenured professor ever taught a class I was at. I had fully adjunct professors or teachers' assistants teaching the night class. And what that's code for is all of those teachers were working in the same day I was. and their night activity was to teach school. And so I didn't know it at the time, but while it doesn't show on credentials and it's a decent, degree in 8 years in economics, I learned from some of the best practitioners I would ever come to meet, because they came in and said, here's the book stuff, but I'm in this every day. Let me tell you what it's like. And who would know at the time, until looking back, that was a really high quality education?
It's interesting. A year ago, for the first time, I taught as an adjunct. I taught marketing at George Mason University. It was so much fun. It was something that I always wanted to do. It's nearby here where we live in Northern Virginia. I taught a class from about 7 to 10 one night a week.
That's the night class.
And I just, throughout the semester, I had such empathy for everybody. Everybody had different things going on during the day.
Right.
Because, I felt like I could be in their shoes. I was working a full-time job during the day, right, and then coming to the classroom. So I had an appreciation for what the students were going through. So
hold on. Let me add to that.
Yeah.
If they went home and said to whoever's at home, I've got the best course this year, because Andrew Moses is teaching it, and this guy, and I'm not going to patronize you here, but what you have done and the stories you can tell, can you imagine how much better, honestly, your class would have been than the 10 to 11 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, earlier in the day, same campus, by a really trained instructor who's been doing it for 30 years. Trust me, that's what I'm talking about. That was rich learning. And the other is nice, but actually I would see a real high quality that comes from practitioners.
Well, that's very kind of you to say, Richard. I appreciate that. I took some classes in the evening and I took some classes during the day, but I had professors, great professors throughout the day and night. But I do see what you're saying. It's interesting, right? And it's certainly with what you were doing at the time in trying to balance it all, it was certainly a point of connectivity, and you were dealing with real practitioners who were working during the day.
Think of yourself. Talk about pulling the tarp. These are people who do it for a living, already know how. They've already succeeded, and they choose to come back and help others do it too. I mean, that's pretty inspired. And I don't know why you chose to teach that course, but I'll bet you got as much out of it as the students did. I just bet.
I got a ton out of it. I hope my students got enough out of it.
I bet they did. I'll go check your satisfaction scores after we're done here.
That's right. Rate my professor and the, exactly. The scores. You just mentioned pulling the tarp, and Richard, we've talked about it. The reason I call this show "Everybody Pulls the Tarp" is because I have a philosophy and a mindset that great teams and great organizations are powered by individuals who contribute in unexpected ways, who go outside the boundaries of their job description, who never say that's not my job, and who do whatever it takes. Correct. As you were rising from bank teller to, again, there's a million stops in between, but bank teller to where you ended up in the banking industry as the executive chairman and CEO of the 5th largest commercial bank in the country. That's a pretty significant rise. I'm sure you had your tarp pulling moments. What were the little things you did throughout your career that you feel like really accelerated your success?
So first of all, I love the idea of pulling the tarp. So let's start there. Philosophically, my paradigm is that it's important to know that you're lucky and smart. And I want to pause there for a minute, because all of us are as lucky as we are smart, and some people are just more fortunate. And it's important to never forget that, because if you ever think you got here all on your own and you did something so perfectly choreographed that's the only reason you're successful, I think you'd be wrong. And so there's a humility that comes with that, servant leadership, if you want to call it. So the first philosophy is expect nothing of your team that you wouldn't expect of yourself. Wait for it and prove it through your actions, not your words. And so all the little things are those moments where you never found yourself in any level of hierarchy when people expected it. If we're going to go paint houses for a habitat, who's going to climb up on the ladder and hang from the eaves? I'll do it. And the joke is, well, you shouldn't do it. Well, why shouldn't I do it? Well, because if something happens to you, you're the boss. No, I can paint well up from high. I'm not afraid of heights, and we're all in this together. There's no hierarchy. But the other thing I want to say, Andrew, don't forget, though, there are moments when the hierarchy is also important, because people want to know when a decision has to be made, a hard one, that you are ready to make it. You have to distinguish. You have more than one role to play. And when you don't need hierarchy, to get anything done, then drop it and be pari passu with everybody. But don't be hesitant to be the one that steps up and says, we've got to make this decision. And I've been vested with that responsibility. But humility wears itself most brilliantly when you're not trying to lead.
So I want to make sure I understand correctly what you're saying there. That's really interesting. So there's when hierarchy is important, kind of seize it and show that you're the leader and ready to make the decision. But when hierarchy is not warranted, which is probably in most instances,
drop it.
Roll up your sleeves and lead by example.
Absolutely. And expect no visibility for it and no attribution. I mean, literally, that's the other part. Is if you're in the middle of helping everybody do the same thing and you stop for the photo op because the CEO's helping paint the house, you've lost it all. The answer is don't take a picture of me. Get a picture of these guys over here. Look what they're doing with their free time. And it just starts to wear well when you actually do believe you're not at all any more important than anyone else, but ready to jump in when you have to.
So between bank teller and CEO, you right. I'm sure you made some nice jumps in terms of your title and you climbed the corporate ladder. But right. you've told me that you believe that you made more lateral moves in your career than anybody
anyone I've ever met. And that's a little courageous, but I'm going to tell you right now, it's the smartest thing you can do if you're listening, because it's a pretty easy example. If you and I, Andrew, were going to build a 2-story home, we would lay the foundation X wide and X deep. But if I told you this house potentially could be 8 stories tall, we would build the foundation wider and deeper for the stability that's necessary to go higher. So simply put, I just built a way larger foundation and spent more time building out so that you could build up. But I'd like to confess, it wasn't choreographed that way. I didn't think of how smart that would look in hindsight. But what it did say is when I was asked to take on another role, I was always willing. It didn't matter. I didn't start with how much is the pay or what's the grade level. And it starts to serve you well because you get known to be the person that goes in and does the job and then seeks recognition after, as opposed to seeking the recognition and then taking the job. It's a very part of that humility, but it's, again, and I was as lucky as I was smart because I could have done the same thing and got no return for it. But I tell you what, I kept building. We had more cement on that platform long before we started building up, and then it was able to go high.
And then you're in a position to be able to draw upon all of those experiences and that diversity of thought and experience? Yes,
because at that point, you actually have walked in the shoes of most of your team. In other words, it's not just theoretical. When I walk into a bank, and banks, everybody's seen a bank, there's 2 sides to a bank. There's the tellers, and then there's the people sitting at the desks doing non-teller things. Because I started as a teller for years, as I would go to visit branches and I would get handled, people would drive you there and prep you and all that, I'd walk right and go straight over to the tellers. And I'd start saying hello to tellers and customers, and everybody over on the big people side would be like, why is he over there? And the answer is because right now, I want to thank them for what they're doing every day. And I know you're available because I see your seats empty. So it's a matter of behaving in a way too that shows that everyone's got an equality and equal value. And it pays you back dividends as long as it's authentic. I'm giving you no advice here that is choreographed or crafted based on a best practice that isn't authentic. Don't do it if it's not, because people will sniff it out.
Well, you can see clearly in talking to you, Richard, the authenticity. So that's why I'm curious, because I'm sure we'll get an authentic answer on this question. You're at the top of the banking mountain. You're the CEO and executive chairman of U.S. Bancorp, as I mentioned, age 59, I believe, at the time. Correct. And you make the decision to leave. I know part of that is a belief you have around succession planning and how to enable the future. Talk about that decision, and then we'll get to Make-A-Wish.
Yeah, I love this. So I became CEO at 48, and I said then, it wasn't 10 years later, I said then, I should serve no longer than 10 years if to the board you're willing to have me. Why not, they said. I said, because I don't think anybody should run anything for longer than 10 years. And I say this, Andrew, because if you're a good leader, I believe this very soundly, then you start to leave your impact and it starts to look like you, like a family. And if you're a really good leader, then you realize that after a while, it needs another leader. And so the self-actualization that says I shouldn't be running it for my own benefit, but be privileged to run it while I can. So I'm going to say 4 years before we transitioned, I said to the board, we're coming up now to the 10 years. I'd like to execute on that plan. And I remember the reaction was like, oh, I didn't think you meant that when you said it. I mean, why would you leave now? We've gone through the recession. We're doing so great. I said, because I still believe what I believed. And let's take the time we need to get the right successor. And so as it turns out, I left after 11 years just because it wasn't perfectly choreographed, but it was a sound belief that running anything, it doesn't matter, CEO is just another title. If you stay anywhere too long, if you know the second curve theory is as you work your way up, you get to a precipice. And if you don't re-evolve and jump the curve and do it again, you will go on down the back side of the curve because you will fail to innovate. And that's what I think happens to leaders. Average CEO in America, last I looked, is 4.5 years. Now that's a combination of those who recognized they were there long enough and those who actually didn't work out very well and got asked to find the door. But I do think that it's important that you lead as long as you can while you're still relevant and fresh, and then believe yourself not to be so capable that you can evaluate the next curve. Let someone else do it.
What fascinating advice. And again, back to your authenticity. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
11 years isn't exactly 10, but again, it's not perfectly choreographed, but pretty darn close. How do you, okay, so then how do you go from US Bancorp to now the president and CEO of Make-A-Wish? Talk about how that phone call or email, or how does that happen?
So, you know, I also would tell you that you should never set a goal, just set a direction so that it's not limiting. So if you were to set a goal, by the time I'm, 45, I want to be the division president or whatever. Gosh, in 3 years, if you're 42, do you know how many other roles could have come up between now and then? And you've missed all those because you're working toward one that's there today. So I retired from US Bank on purpose, on time, with no plans on where I would go. But I said, anybody who was asking, I'm going to go seek an opportunity to run a not-for-profit because I feel like that's first derivative impact. And I think that what I've learned over 40 years in business might be helpful, but only if there's one out there. So I began the search after I left the bank. So I didn't do it while I was coming up to the end. I wasn't afraid I wouldn't have something to do. I wasn't trying to be a good doer after years of corporate America. I always planned to do this. And a number of paths came along. Make-A-Wish was the one that made the most sense. I fell madly in love with it. I didn't even know where it was headquartered. And I always said, I'll move wherever the job is. And we're in Phoenix, and here we are today, because there's a certain amount of setting a direction, but not a goal, and letting the things fall into place.
It's almost like it's meant to be, truly authentic, right?
I do feel that way.
It's and your career has included so much. I mean, obviously relationships and a Rolodex second to none, I'm sure,
Right.
but so much community engagement. You've sat in the boards of Red Cross and Mayo Clinic, and so many community organizations and so many community projects over the years. Talk about that for a minute, and obviously you've been involved in so many nonprofits and community initiatives, but how did that impact your career before we get to Make-A-Wish? We'll talk about that in a second.
These are great questions, by the way, just so you know. It completely informed it. So I will say this to you: you're too young, but everybody's too young for this. If you think back to good old America, back in like the early days, think back in the Wild West. There's a TV show called Bonanza that used to be around, and in the old days when America was growing up, you go to a Western town and there was a saloon and a bar and a jail and a hotel and a general store and a bank, always a bank. And I'm not being goofy here. The bank was always the center of the community. It's where the money was. Money equaled growth, and it had a chance for people to have beliefs and dreams that the bank could help facilitate. In fact, as a sidebar, every dollar of deposits in a bank today is $7 in loans. That's the leverage of banking. So if you gave me $100, I have permission soundly to make $700 in loans. That's how America grew. I mean, banks really were the backbone. So with that as a backdrop, banks have always been in the community. And take it back to probably your parents' days, like my days. You'd go to a bank, and on Saturdays, the banking office had a community room. And whoever in the community wanted to gather, they go to the bank because it had the room and the space for people to meet. So as a banker, I started getting involved in not-for-profit because bankers, good bankers, got involved in their community and did things that were helping it grow and thrive. And then I just got smitten. And so I started being in not-for-profits as one of my favorite pastimes. But the question you haven't asked yet is being on a board is not like running it. Because a board member, you come in once every 90 days, you're immersed for 20 hours, half a day, you give your guidance, you give your support, and then you're out. And then you leave behind a team that's killing themselves between those 90 increments to do the work that that community needs so much in a not-for-profit space, which definitely doesn't get this kind of attention that for-profit does, but its remarkable influence on the community is actually greater than people know.
Sure is, and an organization that's made so much impact is Make-A-Wish, and
Yes.
so many of the people watching and listening to us today have heard of Make-A-Wish, but I think few probably understand the mechanics of how you guys do what you do. So let's spend a minute just let's give the audience some perspective on the mechanics. How does Make-A-Wish work?
Got it. 40 years old. First wish was here in Phoenix, which is why we're headquartered. And Make-A-Wish, Andrew, in 1980, when it started, was a charity for dying children. So I want to get this really clear because it's not anymore. So it really was the last wish of a dying child. And how beautiful and pure is that? However, in 1993, which matters last, but many years ago, it was redesigned to be a charity for children with critical illnesses, many of which could be fatal. But the residents of a hope in their treatment time turns out to be life-changing. So the way it works is this. I'll use myself. If any of my 3 children, when they were younger, had either been born with or came along in their childhood a very strong life-threatening disease, there are many, as you know, let's say cancer, then it would be my kid's physician that would refer my child to Make-A-Wish. It starts with a physician's referral. So the physician world in America, we have trained and educated and have amazing advocacy from the physicians. So they know when they see Richard Davis's 11-year-old daughter with cancer, you know, among the things we can do besides this chemotherapy and all the other medical, I've got to get her involved in Make-A-Wish because I know them to be as important as the medicine I'm going to give. Then my daughter is referred to the local Make-A-Wish, and there are 60 chapters across the country. And she would be referred to, in this case, the Arizona chapter. And they would then meet her. They would meet me and my wife, and they would say, what do you want, Melissa? What do you want your wish to be? Anything you want, name it, we can do it. And it wouldn't be like one answer. It'd be, let's come on in and let's discover it together. And then finally, they would decide what it is. The chapter would go to work and design the most remarkable experience for this child. Then we would look forward to it. We'd count it down. We'd live it. We'd capture it on film. And then we'd let her keep it for the rest of her life. And when the child looks back, no matter how old they are, they will tell us, when they're articulate enough, they'll say, it was singularly the most important thing that happened in my life to this day since the day of my diagnosis. And wait for it, my family would say exactly the same thing, because it takes a moment to give the child their control back. It gives them their childhood back, even for a while. And there's nothing quite like the remarkable incidence of hope and belief that is created when people get around a kid.
It's incredible work, and I'm not sure a lot of people realize this. What you just said there, right? The residents of hope helps in many cases, fight the disease or the condition or whatever it is. So, I don't remember exactly what the number is. You may have shared it with me. I may have read it, but something to the effect of 80 to 90% of the wishes up until recently have involved travel.
Yeah.
So
you remember it right.
So let's talk about the pandemic and all the social distancing. How has that, forced you guys to pull the tarp in new ways?
Right. I was going to go there next. So the tarp is still there. We still need to protect the grounds crew, needs to protect the field, but it's now snowing, not raining. Tarp is still important, but it's just a different purpose. So in Make-A-Wish world, 15,000 annual wishes a year. 2 kids, by the way, I should have said this earlier, 7 in 10 of our children graduate to adulthood. So 7 in 10 can tell the story later. And even those who don't pass through childhood, it's still just as remarkable. But what you remember is I told you that nearly 90% of those 15,000 wishes included a travel by air and or a visit to a large destination. Think Disney World. Think an NFL game or the Super Bowl. Either of those would qualify. Think a trip to Hawaii, a trip to the Galapagos, a chance to go meet the Pope. All that to say is it just completely squashed our wish pipeline. So, not to be dissuaded, because after all, we're dealing with kids who believe in anything, and we have to believe for them. We changed the approach this year for the first time. And if you remember the old adage, the genie in the bottle, and the genie in the bottle gives you 3 wishes. You get to rub on the bottle and pick 3 wishes. So now the next child, let's go back to my example, Melissa would be brought in today and say, you get to wish for anything you want. You get 3 wishes. One of them cannot be a travel by air, and it cannot be to a large place of destination. So you can be those, it can be the Galapagos, and it can be Disney, but give me a third one so that if we can't get to it soon enough, we can do that wish. And we never let them be ranked. And soon enough, by the way, means in the window of their therapy and their medicine, because if we're not a travel agent, we don't want to do it 5 years from now. We do it right now when they need that experience. So the other day we celebrated Macy's, brought in 6-year-old Elizabeth from Northern California, and she didn't have to go to New York City. Their folks virtually, she designed a dress. And right this minute, Macy's online Elizabeth's dress, the one she designed, is for sale in Macy's. Amazing. And then we get some proceeds, but Elizabeth got the experience of a lifetime, right? And so you could be mayor for a day. You can have a camper. We can get you on an experience with Oprah Winfrey. She just did one last week. 1,000 of the 15,000 wishes are celebrities, and the celebrities are remarkable people. I'm falling in love with more and more celebrities because I see how they have treated this situation. But if you would be a celebrity, so if a kid wants to meet you, the hope was they were going to fly to you, meet you somewhere in Northern Virginia, or meet you at a sporting event, get to spend some time with you and get to know you, get a photo op and all that. Well, now it's going to be a video call like we're having. Instead of it being lesser of a wish, you end up doing more than your 10-minute offer to spend time. Almost all these wishes have been an hour or longer. The child and the celebrity spend very close time getting to know each other. The celebrity takes them around. You know, Duff, the chef, the other day walked a child through his garden to show where all the food comes from. By the time they're done, they have personal telephone numbers. They've had wonderful experiences. They still make a promise to get together. The kids captured it on video, so they got all the bragging rights. And the child often says to us, just so you know, this was better. Meeting Ryan Reynolds for 45 minutes was better than what I thought would be going to his movie production and meeting him at the end of the day. So we're learning to pivot. And my point is, different isn't lesser, it's just different.
It's just different. Learning to pivot. The celebrities you described there pulling the tarp, contributing in unexpected ways. It's incredible. But Make-A-Wish also relies on 40, 50,000 volunteers and 12 or 1,300 employees on your team.
Correct.
Talk about what makes the Make-A-Wish team and its volunteers so special.
Yeah, so they're both teams are motivated by the greater good. They have to believe that the value of one child's life has the infinite power of changing everyone around them. You have to believe that. Because if you think you're just helping one child at a time, it's not near as inspiring than if you believe you're creating a whole community. I'll give you an example. In the state of New Hampshire, because of the police chief in the largest city, reaching out to all the police chiefs in every part of New Hampshire, as an example, every wish child in New Hampshire that is traveling on their trip pre-COVID gets a police escort to the airport, because that one police chief realized that for his team of officers to be able to spend a little time every once in a while, something that inspired, has changed their love for their job and for him as their boss and for their ability to be community servants in a way that's not just protecting you, with a gun and from bad people. So the gift of giving is what our staff and our volunteers have already learned. There's the old adage that it's better to give than to receive, and we all kind of gloss right over that because it sounds right. You've never seen it in spades more than a Make-A-Wish. So if I were to ask you right now to grab your phone and to do a selfie video for 60 to 90 seconds and narrate with no script a message to one of our wish kids who you'll never meet that you know about Make-A-Wish, you're excited to hear about their wish. You want them to know that we're still all out here pulling for you. We know your wish has been slightly delayed, but I'm just as proxy for all these people that love and care for you. You will call me back and say, first of all, I can't believe it was harder than I thought to say that message because I didn't know what I was going to say. I can't believe what came out of my mouth because I care now so much for this kid I haven't met. And you feel like when your head hits the pillow at night, of all the things you could have done with your life that day, you did something really, really special. And the gift is in many cases in the giving. So that's what our team and our volunteers know. And with it though, you haven't asked, but the other part is it sounds sad because some of these children are in very dire situations. Some are not physically well. Sometimes the wish has to be delayed. And on occasion we have what we call a rush wish, which is an imminent end of life. And I want to just give you this last story because one of our best partners is Disney. They've been with us forever. And Disney is remarkable in so many ways, but who tells stories better than Disney? I mean, they are the storytellers. And I'll tell you, their own words, the only other people that tell stories as well is the Make-A-Wish team. And we had their Imagineers, their best Imagineers, come to one of our meetings with our chapter CEOs. And we spent 3 hours talking about storytelling. And we were there with the intent for Disney to teach our people. And our people were telling our stories. And the meeting was ended. And one of the Imagineers from Disney, who was 40 years with Disney, it was her last official work day was with our team. And she came over to a bunch of our folks at break. And she says, I just want to know, your storytelling is remarkable. Your stories are brilliant. She goes, how come you guys never cry? She says, I'm crying at the videos I'm showing you of Disney stuff, and you're not crying. I'm crying at the stuff you're sharing with me, and you guys aren't crying. And she says, why aren't you guys like crying? I'd been in the job 2 months, and I come up to listen in on this story, and I out loud said, yeah, what about that? How come we don't cry? And one of the chapter CEOs looked over with the others instead, and she says, well, that's easy because this is hope. This isn't sad. This is hope. We are absolutely on a mission to help these children believe that there's a community around them that will care for them no matter what and no matter how. And the Disney lady and I both went, you had me at hello, that's brilliant. But you have to rethink it because it's a different lens to an otherwise challenging situation.
Richard, this has been fantastic. I could talk to you about this for hours, and maybe we'll do a part 2 one day. But again, what a place to wrap up on hope and how hope inspires some of the greatest work that any team or any individual or any leader could do. Congratulations to you, Richard, on all of your success. You're still writing the story, and it's an illustrious story already. Kudos to you and the team at Make-A-Wish for pivoting and seeing that opportunity to pivot and delivering on this critically important work. And most importantly, thank you for spending a few minutes this week with Everybody Pulls the Tarp.
Andrew, I got to say thank you back. And do you have any idea how much respect you provide us by making us one of your special guests and allowing us to tell this story? I do believe that we have a future ahead of us that will be greater, crafted through this difficult time. And if there's any way that Make-A-Wish can inspire and help people to get through times like this, the hope is for them as well. It's not just the kids, it's all of ours. You brought it to me today, so thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Richard.